Hi everyone, for everyone who's listening or is watching, just want to welcome you to the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. So today I'm going to be talking about hosting a podcast. So it's going to be a personal experience about me and about my experiences and what I've learned and how that might be able to help someone who's thinking about it. So if you are thinking about doing a podcast, you need to listen to this video and then you can then make a decision if that's what you want to do. Thank you, everyone. Speak to you soon. Hello, everyone. It's Mark Hayward here. So, today I'm going to talk about podcasting. And I'm going to tell you some of the experiences that I had, some of the things that went well, some of the things that didn't go well. So, all of you can listen and sort of understand there might be someone out there that actually is thinking about doing this. So I would say listen to this and then feedback. I'm happy to have comments about what you think I did well and what I didn't do well and what you might be able to learn from that experience. So I'm going to start right back at the start when I started doing my podcast, which was December the 12th, 2017. So I think my podcast, and initially I started listening to them and really loved them. I found great ability to be able to dip in, dip out of certain people on podcasts. So I liked the business podcasts. I had a passion for business and I wanted to listen to those people. I think initially it was a little bit therapeutic for me. So my first podcast was the struggle, the move that I did from being an admin support in a corporate to a consultant. Now, this was a big deal for me. It was a massive deal for me to make that change, and I think I wanted to share that with other people. A lot of my my feeling of why I do this is I didn't get that support that I'm hopefully providing to you in my 20s. And I think it was really, really important for me to be able to understand that there are people out there that also don't get this sort of support and don't have a mentor or have a boss that's supportive or a line manager that's supportive. So I didn't have that myself, and I think I had to learn to listen to people, to understand people. And equally for me, I got it from a mentor. Some people find mentors in podcasts. You can be a virtual, a digital mentor, absolutely. And I think it was, for me, I wanted to be able to help people to be able to get that itch. Someone might want to do something, but they're not sure. So the best way is to be able to share. So I wasn't very good. I have to admit, if you listen to the first ever episode, I'm probably not very good. But we're now 84, 83, 84 episodes in, and I think I've got a lot better. I now do the video as well on YouTube, as well as the podcast recording. And I think I fell in love with podcasts because I started listening to them when I was commuting. And it was long enough podcast that would be like 30 minutes or 60 minutes that I could get into my travel. And equally then I started going to the gym and then listening in the gym, which was fantastic. And then dog walking. My dog, I love my dog, and walking him all became good reasons to listen to podcasts. So I'd imagine your first port of call, just going to have a slurp from my cup. My Absolute Business Mindset cup, if you've seen that on YouTube. So I started listening to podcasts, and you might ask, well, what was your first port of call? So I started watching Tony Robbins on YouTube as well. And Tony Robbins isn't necessarily massive on podcasts, but he gave me a window into some of the people that I like, or I've eventually liked. So I'm going to mention a few of them. So from the US, you've got Tim Ferriss, and most people have probably heard of Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss. James Altucher, which I found a little bit later on, but have really, really fascinated with the in-depth he goes. And then just for a big shout out in the UK, there's Rob Moore, who is really, really fascinating, really interesting guy. in property, which isn't really my business. Well, a little bit, not really my business, but found him really fascinating. He had a deep interest in self-development and pursuing business and using marketing. So found him really helpful as well. So then I started to, like, after I'd done the first one, it was then, well, what's the rest going to be about? So quickly started to think about, so it was all going to be solo stuff. I was just going to talk to my microphone or the camera eventually, and a lot, probably the first 60 of my episodes were solo monologues, a bit like we're doing now, which I'm talking about something to do with business, and sort of, so it kind of went into 3 different areas. It was either stories, experiences, or techniques that I found, and they could have been inspired by books I was listening to, podcast experiences that I'd had at work, maybe it was something inspired when someone told me about a story. So it was really building on that, and I as I said, the first 60 odd, I had no sort of ambition. There was no sort of prior sort of like what I wanted to achieve. It was just, could I release these and it'd be a little bit therapeutic, a little bit stress relieving, might be a little bit like reviewing and sort of like reflecting, I think the word is. So I started to do it, and it sort of became quite an addiction's probably too strong, but I just really loved doing it. So I ended up loving how to do recordings. I loved the equipment, so the laptop and then the microphone and the video, and to be honest, it's not very expensive. I spent a little bit on the microphone because I wanted it to be good, and I think you should spend a little bit of money on the microphone. The video is good, decent, HD. The big cost was the laptop, which I got a MacBook Pro. I thought there's no point in messing about. If I want to make this decent, it's got to be that it's making a good recording. So yes. We'll talk a little bit further about the equipment in a minute, but essentially I went for sort of mid-range. So this is about £80 to £100, the microphone. The camera is probably less than that, probably £60, £80. The MacBook Pro is like £1,000, I think. But there's ways of getting things cheaper. If you use eBay, if you use Apple returns, there's ways around it to make it a little bit more reasonable. So as I said, my early podcasts were quite raw. They weren't very good, but no one can expect their first podcast to be perfect. I didn't listen to Entrepreneur on Fire, which I did later on. And if I'd have listened to Entrepreneur on Fire first, with John Lee Dumas, he would have given me a complete plan of how to release a podcast, which needs planning. You need to release 10 or have 10 in the bank to release in batches so people can get a taster. You want to get on the iTunes news, Apple Podcasts, but iTunes new and noteworthy, which I didn't do. And that can only be done in the first 8 weeks or 6 weeks, so didn't get that. The numbers I had were relatively low. But to be honest, I just loved it. I just liked doing it, and yeah, if I'd have had a bit more of a plan in action, maybe numbers could have been faster to increase. You do hear people. It's a bit like any sort of social media. If you go to Instagram and you see these people doing these great things, whether it's holidays or nights out, you think, well, I'm at home. What's going on? But equally, like people on these Facebook groups that tell you, oh, I've got thousands of listeners in the first month. Oh, it's so hard. I don't know how I can really leverage this. Well, I can't remember what my first episode was, but it was in the tens. It really wasn't more than 50 probably I had. So it does take a while. And it does get better. Like numbers do increase and you get leverage from social media. But I would say like podcasts are really quite a hot topic at the moment. It's probably in the last 3 years it's really sort of kicked off, and people are using podcasts in the same way as Netflix. Like they can download 10 episodes and basically binge on them if they want, and on certain key points like commutes or gym or whatever. So so it's really a popular thing, and lots of people are springing up with podcasts, which sometimes only last a few weeks, few months or whatever, but I've got to admire him for at least starting. So many people don't even start. But interestingly, historically, podcasts have been around for a long, long time. I remember listening to podcasts probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I was listening to comedy podcasts because they were one of the big strong points. There was comedians which I followed. I can't remember the name of the guy. I should have prepared that. I didn't think of it. Herring, Richard Herring. I remember listening to Richard Herring do various podcasts and recordings of things, and equally Ricky Gervais also was famously doing podcasts and recordings and things. So but that was like 8 years ago, if not more, 9 years ago. But podcasts just slowly kept picking up a few people, kept getting some interest. But it's blown into something quite substantial in the last 3 years. And one of the things that I understood from doing a lot of reading, now I read a lot on websites, listened to people who were talking about podcasts and doing them. It was a lot of reading basically on websites. I Googled a lot how to release a podcast, what to do on a best podcast, how to get traction on a podcast, how to get listeners. Oh man, how many episodes I was just basically just trying different things out. But you quickly understand one important thing, and that's the one important thing which I've kept completely true to, and that is consistency. So at the start I was doing 2 podcasts a week. I was doing a Thursday and a Sunday, and I was able to do that. But I quickly realised that to keep my marriage in a safe place, I need to reduce it to 1 a week. Now, it would be ideal if I could release 2 a week. I think I could do 1 solo and 1 interview, and that would be fantastic. But I have to be realistic about the lifestyle that you lead, and you have to be able to balance work. In my mind, work at the moment is a corporate job. Secondly, your podcast, your side hustle, and equally your family that you have to be able to include in your lifestyle as well. So reduce to one podcast a week. And then my next big thing, which was actually something I experimented with and actually got what I like, was I needed a logo. So if you can see there, if you're watching on YouTube, the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. So I needed to build a logo. I'd never done anything like this before. I had no idea how to do it. Did some reading, went on a website. I can't even remember what the website was, but they gave you 1 free logo. So I signed up, started designing it, liked to have, because it was purely a podcast at that moment, I liked to have the podcast microphone, which you saw just a minute ago. If you're watching this on YouTube, sorry, you can see it on everything I release. I have the logo on, and so I designed it. I didn't have anything apart from the name that I wanted, and so I just experimented. It was the best free thing that I signed up for. Unfortunately, I've signed up for it and I don't even get emails. Like usually you sign up for something and you get various emails telling you that you've missed this and you should be doing this. So I don't. So that was a really good website for me as a user. So got my logo, then started publishing on social media with my logo. On the podcast, it was the logo as well. So you will see that logo. If you're new to my podcast, you'll see that logo everywhere. And then I sort of upgraded sort of my equipment. So I got the microphone, which I've now got, and put a muffler. I think it's called a muffler. Put the head on there, which takes out the clicking and the of words. Equally, I'm just going to reach over to this. This is so if you're on YouTube, you'll be able to see this headset, which you just see there. Which was really good for having interviews initially. Very good to be able to hear all of it. So as I say, upgraded the equipment a little bit, and then upgraded so I got the video as well. So that then meant I could use YouTube. Now that was quite a long way through. And to be honest, I'm really not leveraging YouTube as perhaps I should or would like to. It's one of those things that I just don't have the time to do. Would like to do more on YouTube, but just thought, well, let's just keep on delivering on YouTube. If something comes up with it, then we can leverage it and we can work with it. But to be honest, let's just keep on releasing and we'll see what happens. And then the other thing I realised very quickly was to get an increase in numbers, you needed social media. Now, there are other ways of advertising. And it's not just social media, but for a podcast, digital podcast, you kind of want to leverage social media. So did a lot on Twitter initially, and then have moved a little bit more to Instagram and sort of thinking about how I can leverage Facebook as well. But the importance of social media, again, is consistency. You have to deliver as regularly as you can. And then I found that my podcast numbers started to go up. It was organically growing. I've never really advertised. I've experimented with Instagram advertising, but pretty much my numbers have grown organically. And I was on a meetup, which is like in the UK, they sort of have groups that you sort of get together. And it was just really interesting to hear people organically growing things. And I thought, well, I'm gonna keep doing this. This is the way I want to do it. So actually, on the first meetup that I went to, I actually found a person that was really, really interested in podcasts. He was a property guy, and I just got bold on the first time I was there, and I went, I want to interview you. 60 odd episodes, maybe more episodes of doing solo monologues. I said to him, look, I think you're great. I'd love to interview you. And he surprisingly went, yeah, all right then, let's do it. So as I say, I met him. I arranged to do it at his place. I had all my equipment. I had all, and he equally had his equipment there at his house. And so I recorded with the video, with the YouTube, with the microphone, with the laptop. And you'll see that if you go back maybe 10, maybe 12, 15 episodes, you'll see my first interview, and you can give me feedback whether you think it was terrible or not. I think it went quite well, with Andy Arter, A-N-D-Y, surname A-R-T-E-R. I think it's about like maybe episode 70-ish, and check that out. And that was a London podcast meetup that I met him, as I said, and I think it went well. And then started me getting interested in doing interviews. It's like, well, a lot of podcast framework is based on interviews. So that went, in my mind, went quite well. Had a steady supply of listeners and downloaders. He publicised it on social media. I think he spoke to some friends and colleagues as well. And it went really well. So then I started thinking, well, who else do I know that is business and I can interview? So I started asking friends and colleagues. And one of my colleagues that I'd worked for a long, long time, well, about 3 or 4 years, I really, really was fascinated by his interest in AI technology. And I decided that I wanted to interview him. So you'll see that that's Richard Abbott. And that was really just a really nice, relaxed interview, went really well. And then, just for me, bizarrely, I then started being reached out by people reaching out to me. I've listened to your podcast. I'd love to be on it. And that was quite a change for me. That for me meant some validation. And to be honest, this journey for me doing podcast has been a very slow in increase in numbers, a very steady organic growth. Actually, people coming to me and saying, "I'd really like to be on your podcast," was quite a thrill. Was quite exciting. So we've done a couple of those. We had to get the technology available. We had to get Zoom, which is there's been lots of advertising on this podcast because it's all the stuff that I use, and started interviewing people on Zoom. So now you'll see my podcasts are a steady stream of interviews, people I've reached out to, people they've reached out to me. And I've reached out to them, and they're going to do these. So basically, this is my solo monologues, but there will be going forward a mixture between interviews and social monologues. So I'm going to say pure to what I started. That's why I want to continue doing these solo monologues, but equally, I think people are interested to hear other people's story. So I've developed so far a technique in interviewing. I talk about people's career and where they started, where they've gone, and you'll hear that on all of the interviews. So really looking forward to continue that going forward. Now, something that happened about a month ago, maybe less, 3 weeks ago, there was something on a Facebook group, a podcast Facebook group, which said about that they're thinking about doing a podcast radio station. Please send 300 words on what the podcast is, what you do, and why I should do it, why I should select you. So I really, really, really concentrated on this. I thought this was quite a leveraged opportunity, and I met him, and he was bona fide. It was an idea that he had, and he had investment, and he had they call it a carriage, which is like for a DAB radio station. And we're currently in the middle of the 2-month trial. He's got a bunch of my podcasts which he's going to release, and we're going to see what happens there. This is going to be quite exciting. It's a different concept. It's one of these things that I like to experiment with. I like to try different things, meet new different people, do things that I don't talk about too much. And this is why podcasting, although it's been in my life for 18 months now, so I wanted to share some of my experiences with you. So you will still get that, but it might be interesting to hear it on the radio. Some people might like it, some people might not. So I'm waiting to see what the increase, if there's any traction there. One of the other things I did was I created a website. Another plug. Did GoDaddy, which is a British podcast. Website hosting, and that you can design a website quite easily, and I've talked about on another podcast about releasing a website. So trying to get all my sort of ducks in a row. If something happens, something that goes well, then I've got everything ready. I've got the social media, but who knows? This is completely we're at a juncture where things could take off, things could happen, numbers could increase, or equally we just have this steady organic growth and we go from there. And so some of the other things, so people have started talking to me about monetizing podcasts, and that's something that I'd like to think about and sort of develop. So a couple of things that are important are affiliate marketing, which if you're listening to the podcast you might hear every so often. I'm also trying to talk to people about business coaching. I've got a lot of experience, 12 years experience, 13 years experience on a corporate environment, getting promoted, working in a politically corporate environment, doing well. And I think I can share that. And the whole reason why I did this podcast for people in their 20s or 30s to really push their career, I think I can help you with business coaching. So if anyone is interested, either go to my website, which is www.absolutebusinessmindset.com, or reach out to me on Instagram Mark J Hayward, and direct message me on there. And we'll try and get some business coaching. I'm trying to see if there's any experiment on traction. If people want to get this from me, that it can be in the UK, it can be overseas. We can use Skype or Zoom or whatever it is. If you're overseas, I'm flexible on times. I can do late. I can do earlier in the US. If you're in the US, I know I've got quite a lot of listeners and downloads in the US. So if you do have time available in the US and you want some business coaching, then please let me know. As I said, in those two places, the website or Instagram DM, direct message. And so I feel very positive at this stage of my podcasting career. Things are clicking into place. The ducks, as the saying goes, are going in a row. One thing I do believe in, to be successful at anything, you need to do your 10,000 hours. I'm not sure who quoted 10,000 hours, but you need to do it a lot. A lot of the guys that are good at podcasts and are successful at podcasts have done like 300-400 episodes. I'm merely on 83 or 84, but it feels good. It feels there's traction. It feels there's a steady flow of people that are listening to me. There are people, it seems like, who are returning to listen to me. And one of the ways I've sort of found that is I release on a Sunday night, and when I look at the numbers on Monday morning, I do have regularly the same sort of numbers, if not a little bit more, every month of people listening. So that's really, really, really exciting. I still love doing this. I still love doing the process. It would be, if I can generate revenue, then maybe I might outsource some of the tasks. But essentially, I still love the process. I still love doing it. So if I needed to leverage, then maybe I would outsource some of the bits. But I'm not at that stage yet. I need to have a revenue stream before I start outsourcing. So there's lots to be excited about in this whole arena for me. Hopefully some of you picked up some ideas and you've thought that this might be something for you. Equally, you might just want to listen to me and take in what I've said, and that equally is important. I think whoever's out there thinking they've got a message, they should think about doing podcasts. Equally, if you don't and you just want to be a consumer, then that's great as well. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. I've just mentioned a couple of times, Instagram, Mark J Hayward, Twitter, Mark Hayward 169. Check my website out if you've got any questions. Check out the different services I've got there. Business coaching is big at the moment, so please let me know if you've got any questions. If you want me to reach out to you, then I'm happy to do that. Patreon, I've still got the Patreon account, experimenting with that. There's different tiers, you can get different sort of support services there as well, so please do check that out as well. Wherever there's a social media, check me out, Mark Hayward, you'll probably find me. I'm experimenting a little bit with LinkedIn as well, so if you're on there as well, thank you for listening. It might be the first time you listened if you're on LinkedIn. And just thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I'd love to get your feedback, and I really appreciate your time. And until next time, thank you very much.